I've got a few things for you today. I have a few things for you today that I think are going to be bullish, hopeful. Hopeful where? Well, we're going to talk about that because we are still in a territory that I'm not going to declare we are on our way to new all-time highs. I'm not there yet. But I do have a perspective that it makes sense to me that where we go from here is that Bitcoin's going to break some resistance and get to a new all-time high. And I'm just going to reiterate this again. I don't give a rat's behind about the timelines. Okay. So we still have 2 months left in 2025, a little bit more than 2 months. And I know that there's lots of people who are holding on to this mindset that it has to happen within the next 2 months. I am not one of those people, but I'm with crypto. I'm leaning bullish. With stocks, I'm just a flat out moon boy. And that would kind of explain why I have more in stocks than crypto right now, but that could shift on a dime. All right. So let's take a look at some things here. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. All for the algorithm, I suppose. I don't know why I said that. Okay. So on the daily, I have laid out two levels, the two lines in the sand, one below us, one above us. If we lose the level below us, which is currently around $103,000, that's a 50-week simple moving average. Let me show you it on the weekly time frame. 50-week simple moving average, 102.8, a little bit more than 102.8. All right. We lose that on a weekly close. I will not be too excited about Bitcoin for the next several months. Not again. All right. I'm going to say this again. I'm not talking about 2028 because my time frame, I would not be surprised at all if we saw Bitcoin higher in 2026 than in 2025. If we saw Bitcoin higher in 2027 than 2026 or 2025. Now, whatever, if we lose the 50 week, what does that look like? That looks like the first part of 2026 really sucking. But all right, we lose the 50 week on a weekly close. That's not the best for the short term. That's actually really bad for the short term. Medium term, not worried about it. And we have not lost that. We haven't even touched it yet. I mean, there have been more scary times during the cycle where we've touched the 50-week simple moving average. We haven't even touched that, even though this October has probably been, I think for a lot of people, the scariest time. So, okay, what is the upper limit? Okay, again, it is this zone right here. The 618 from the all-time high in October to that bottom. I'm looking at the Coinbase chart right now. I'm looking at the Bitstamp chart. Coinbase is pretty. No, actually, all right. You know what? No, either one's fine because this wick down here is not that major liquidation wick where we saw, different exchanges showed us different prices. But this zone right here, the golden pocket from that all-time high to that bottom where Bitcoin got to 103. And what is that? We see between 117 and 119.5. 117.5, 119.5. Now, something I noticed. Let me show you something. Something that I was like, okay, maybe we've already had our first level of resistance here. Let's just move this down to the top of the wick from, when was that? August. $124,000 Bitcoin in August. What do you see? You see a move right up to the bottom of that golden pocket. So interesting. Some traders, that's just going to be a first level of resistance. If we climb this week, all right, we'll break through that level of resistance. We'll probably then mess around with this golden pocket from the all-time high and get up to 117.5 and get rejected there for a bit. I just want to remind you, these were my two lines in the sand earlier this year. And look what happened when we got up to the golden pocket from the previous all-time high in January to the bear market bottom, golden pocket from there. It's not the bear market bottom, that April 7th bottom of $74,000 Bitcoin and change. Okay. We got resistance at the 618 and it was multiple days of resistance. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And then we broke through and then got rejected the 0.66 and then went right back down. So I'm sure, I don't remember at that time, but maybe a lot of people were like, oh, false breakout, we're going lower from here. But nope, boom. And then when we ripped through all that resistance, it was violent. We got through the 786 even, and then held the 786 as support multiple times. So could we see something similar? I believe what's going to happen if we are to break through here is that it's going to be very similar. We'll get resistance at the 618 and then get resistance at the middle of golden pocket, maybe even a false breakdown. And then when it comes time to break through, we're going to break through the 786 and then back test that as support multiple days. So we'll be hanging around the lower 120s. If we break out, because there's a lot of people of people wanting to short Bitcoin in this circle that I have here. Okay, so what happens if we break through? If we break through, I'm just going to be back on to being an all-out bull. Bitcoin to the 130s, maybe 140s, maybe 150s, maybe even higher than that. Because I'm very curious about something. I think, if we are able to break out, that it's going to catch a lot of people by surprise. But I'll get back to that in a minute here. I want to look at Bitcoin on the weekly time frame. On the weekly time frame, there's just nothing to be afraid about. All right. I mean, what do you want to say? MACD? Nah, MACD looks fine. MACD histogram looks fine. RSI, we do have that triple bearish divergence on the RSI. And you know what? Maybe we rise up and make it a quadruple bearish divergence. Or maybe could we just bust through that? It's possible. It's very possible. And oh my goodness, if we bust through that, and what would that mean? Like, from here, maybe move up to the 130s, we bust through that and then back test that. Woo. Watch out, because it's game on. But, all right, whatever comes next, there's going to be some drama. I want you to hear that, and I want you to be prepared for it. Whether it's drama to the downside, drama to the upside, there's going to be drama. And let's take a look at this tweet from Mr. Anderson here. Bitcoin is at its lowest weekly scale volatility reading in its entire history. So some of you can appeal to the institutional cycle versus the old cycles. The institutional cycle, it's here. Okay, whatever. But let's rely on past history a little bit. Every time volatility has gotten anywhere close to this level, Bitcoin has made dramatic moves. Compression this tight doesn't last. Markets breathe in, then breathe out. Right now, Bitcoin is holding its longest breath in history. Volatility is cyclical. Calm gives birth to chaos, but that chaos is creation. For those who understand it, volatility isn't danger, it's destiny. This is why Bitcoin remains the gift, that never stops giving. So what are we looking at here? I mean, you can see just really, blah. I think I'm going to sneeze soon here. But then here's what we're paying attention to at the bottom of the screen here, just very, very low volatility. And the question, and there's a lot of debate about this, is when we see a spike in volatility, where is that spike going to go? Is it going to go up or going to go down? It could go up, it could go down. I know that's a trope. People hate it. I hate it when people say that, make that comment. I'm just trying to analyze things based off of what I'm seeing in the markets, And this is actually what makes me think if we're breaking up to this, you guys, we're not ready for what might come. And throw a lot of those price targets away. My target of $155,000 would probably be too low. I'm saying when for between now and the 2028 halving, but if that were to happen sometime sooner rather than later, and it goes to the upside, that is a violent move to the upside. And a few reasons why I think it's to the upside. Look at gold, man. Do you understand how significant this was for gold? This move right here, from $3,500 to $4,400. Let's go to other time frames. I mean, you look at the weekly. That's parabolic. That's a parabola for gold, for one of the slowest moving assets around. You look at the monthly chart. That is a parabola. And that is, we're talking about the biggest asset in the world in terms of market cap. That is multiple trillions of dollars being added to gold's market cap. Now, I'm not talking about multiple trillions of dollars being added to Bitcoin's market cap, but I am, let's go back to the daily. This is peak. This is a peak I would not be surprised if gold from here did not break this peak for another year. I've talked about that a lot. And so we're talking about, the rotation, gold spikes up and then it rotates to Bitcoin. That may be in play right now. I mean, Bitcoin's up more than $10,000 from its recent bottom. That might be in play right now. Bitcoin gold chart is looking bullish. Let me actually pull that up. The Bitcoin gold chart. And where do we go? I don't think that this is my worst case scenario, but this isn't really even a trend line because it takes 3 touches to make a trend line. So I don't think that we go here. I don't even know what to say, what that is here, but a move up to this line that's not actually a trend line yet and get rejected there. I think actually more so that the Bitcoin gold chart is going to go up here, and that's a more likely scenario, but that's not even like we might, there's lots of levels here. What if we went and did a double top on the Bitcoin gold chart? That is a much, much higher price in Bitcoin versus gold. You can see we did a double bottom. Why not a double top? But if we do a double top, what's stopping Bitcoin from going higher versus gold there? So, okay. All right. I hope you understand. I hope you're with me as to just multiple trillions of dollars in the gold chart added. Could it be possible that a fraction of that is then added to the Bitcoin chart? So that's a reason why I would say, yes, it's more likely that we're going to the upside with this volatility break. I'm not there yet. Let's break through this resistance here. I'm not there yet. I don't want to talk about this. Ethereum dominance holding weekly Ichimoku cloud. Cool, man, But here's another thing. All right. If I am of this mindset, which I am, that we are about to see, that we are we're turning the corner from 1998 to 1999, which if you know what that means, 1999, and I'm not saying this is going to happen to this percentage, but in 1999, the NASDAQ went up by like 150%. All right, and I suspect that we are about to enter 1999 in the stock market. There's lots of charts that I've talked about, lots of charts that I can show you. I want some fresh perspective here. And here's my man, Part-Time Trader. Give him a follow on X. And don't be too sad by where he thinks Bitcoin is going when it goes there. It's lower than whatever number is in your head right now as far as how low it's going. It's lower. Let me just tell you that, okay? And maybe he's right, man. And if so, then it's going to be terrifying. And I hope you stack some sats at those prices. All right. But with the NASDAQ, he's pointed out some chart patterns here that are not, that you cannot ignore. All right, 5 charts that tell us NASDAQ's about to boom. All right, first of all, weekly breakout from a bullish megaphone pattern. So you see something like this, and this is something you can't ignore. All right, megaphone patterns, what you would have expected when you see it get up to the top of this level is a move right back down to the bottom. What would that have been? In 2026, it would have been a move down to 15,000. And that wouldn't have been fun. But instead, we are seeing a breakout of this megaphone pattern, which is incredibly bullish. So breakout, back test eventually, and then bada bing, bada boom, much higher, 30,000, maybe 40,000. Who knows? That's chart number 1. There's many, many charts. Okay. Number 2, echoes of the 90s .com boom. Price bounces along with an uptrend before going vertical into a major prolonged correction. We're about to enter the vertical bit. So there's a couple charts here, right? Oh no, yeah, here we go. 1999. Look at what that looked like. We're just kind of holding support, and then we go vertical, and then we're too far gone. I mean, this looks like a parabola. This looks like Bitcoin's chart in 2017. And then when we come down, it's just there's way too much fear in the market, too much profit taking, just a needed overswing of that. So then we lose that support in a dramatic way. And so could it be, we break out of this bullish megaphone pattern, and my goodness, I'm just looking at his projections now. I didn't notice that. So forget about maybe 30 or 40,000 in the NASDAQ. How does 51,500 sound? Oh, that is, yeah, that's the equivalent of a 1999 move. But then, after that, and I am a big believer in what's after that. Yikes. Okay. All right. Next chart. NASDAQ looks set to continue its outperformance against other markets. This is the NASDAQ versus the Hang Seng Index. And so another megaphone pattern versus that index. Okay, blow off top and then get rejected, I guess, at a, oh, wait, that's not a megaphone. That's a rising channel. Yeah. All right, so there's that. And then NASDAQ versus gold looks incredibly bullish. Descending broadening wedge pattern. That is a bullish pattern that most of the time breaks to the upside. So NASDAQ versus gold, especially considering what I said about gold earlier in this chart. So boom, maybe a repeat, maybe going right back to that 1999 all-time high. There's something to pay attention to in the future if we do see a breakout here, a double top, NASDAQ versus gold, and get rejected there. So there's that. In chart number 5, we see the tech index versus M2 money supply has flipped the 2000 high into support. The biggest and most explosive phase is still yet to come. So boom, resistance there, very hard resistance in 2024. April 7th bottom, and then boom, went wild, back test, boom. Flip previous all-time high into support. So if we are bullish on the NASDAQ, does it make sense to expect Bitcoin to enter a bear market? Some of you might say yes. I don't agree with you. I think the reason why you're saying yes, it's based on one data point, and it's based on the post-halving year. But I would submit to you actually that Bitcoin has been underperforming. Because think about this. All right. If the spot Bitcoin ETFs did not exist, let's say they were never approved in 2024, and maybe we'd be hopeful for 2026 or 2027, something like that. What would Bitcoin's price be right now? I once did research on this, and I estimated that the spot ETFs would accumulate something like 400,000 Bitcoin. And my estimate, Bitcoin, when I did that research, was about $30,000 at the time. I estimated that if the ETFs had existed at that time, instead of $30,000, Bitcoin would have been 53,000. All right. So think about that. 30,000. Let's think about that in terms of percentages. That's almost double. That's about 75% higher. So let's say there were no ETFs and Bitcoin was 75%. Or I don't know how to, the actual price, that this price is 75% higher, 114 and change, is 75% higher than what Bitcoin would have been without the ETFs. Well, actually, it's probably much more than that, believe it or not, because the ETFs have acquired much more than 400,000 Bitcoin. I'm blown away. But it's more than double of that. I think it's like 900,000. I don't have that number off the top of my head. But let's say 900,000. Let's just say that. Instead of 400,000, 900,000. And then you do those calculations again, and what do you get? You get probably a Bitcoin price that'd be around $50,000 right now. And I am very convinced. I'm actually quite convinced that if the ETFs didn't exist at this moment, Bitcoin's price would be around $50,000 at this moment. So that is how much of an impact the ETFs made. And so let's just picture this. Let's do a mental exercise. Let's say that Bitcoin peaked this cycle at like $65,000 and it was at $50,000 right now. You might think something different, but I would expect Bitcoin from there. No, let's say Bitcoin peaked at, let's just say 65,000. Okay. All right. I would expect from there for Bitcoin to go much higher. Bitcoin to go well over $100,000. All right. So you just have to do that mental framework and think, what if with the proper conditions, Bitcoin is actually going to go much, much higher, which is why my 2027 estimate is way higher than where I think it's going to peak, if it hasn't peaked already, in 2025. Like more than double, actually, believe it or not. So what do we make of that? I'm telling you, I am quite convinced that no matter what, time is your friend. And we have, let's say the first quarter of 2026 sucks. Let's say it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We have opportunities ahead of us. I want you to hear that from me. All right. And I'm going to leave it at that. It's been 20 minutes, so there was some other stuff I could have shown you. Let's just leave it at that. That is all I have for today. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of your week, and I will certainly be seeing you in another video. Peace.